The question that preoccupies and even haunts INFPs is, who am I really? Now, there are many types that don't particularly care about that question and even think it's quite a stupid question. But for INFPs, it's kind of a big deal. And they have a very interesting approach to finding their true selves. I once heard someone describe confidence not as something you gain, but as something you recapture. When we're children, we are uninhibited or unconstrained by social awareness. We're free to both act and react in line with our natural selves. I'm aware that this is not true for everyone when they're young, but just go with me on this. INFPs share this philosophy that their true self is not something that's forged or created, but instead is something that's discovered. It's in there somewhere, but is somehow obscured or covered up by who knows what, society or narrow-mindedness. You can insert your own hippie reason. They do this by using their introverted feeling and their extroverted intuition in conjunction with each other. Their extroverted intuition generates or seeks out new perspectives and experiences that their introverted feeling then makes a judgment upon. Much like the INTP, who is dissecting and filtering ideas through the lens of logic, in order to create this logical framework through which they can approach the world. The INFP says, let me try this idea or perspective and see how I feel about it. Thereby, instead of creating a logical framework like the INTP, they instead create a value system. Both INFPs and INTPs have introverted sensing in their third slot, which means that they are much more likely than their ENTP and ENFP counterparts to feel comfortable settling down in both the literal sense, such as living in the same place for a long period of time, and in the abstract sense. These are the set of ideas and values that I want to commit to and live by. So let me give a practical example of NE feeding into FI. INFPs seem to be disproportionately represented among actors, but only certain types of actors. I've noticed two distinct categories of actors. There are those like Michael Caine or Morgan Freeman or Jack Nicholson, who actually change very little with each role they play. In a sense, they are playing themselves in each role. Then there are those actors that are completely transformative in each role. Take, for example, someone like Johnny Depp, who is almost unrecognizable with each character he plays. And over the course of his career, you can kind of see his personality develop or reveal itself. He goes from being this kind of fresh-faced, very standard and generic actor to becoming this very quirky and strange, like duck-billed platypus of traits. I think he's very representative of INFPs and their NE and FI. Over time, taking in many different perspectives and identities and characters and appearances. And with their FI, they're plucking, like magpies, the parts that speak to their authentic selves. The NE feeds the FI. The introverted feeling and introverted sensing interact to create this stable value system that INFPs can approach the world with. It seems to be an inescapable fact. Society in general, and particularly the education system, is a TE, extroverted thinking, construct. If you imagine two societies or systems, one founded entirely on individualism and the other founded on standardization and structure, it's hardly surprising that the latter of those two is the one that prevails most of the time. Even if the inhabitants of that society don't always enjoy living in it. It just works better as an entity. Since INFPs have extroverted thinking as their inferior function, I've noticed this distrust of the extroverted thinking, rigid and regimented approach. This has led a lot of INFPs that I know towards things like mysticism or spirituality, although strangely, rarely religion. I think it comes from the need to circumvent the TE structures. It's like they believe that insight can never really come from conventional means. The wall that exists between their dominant introverted feeling and their inferior extroverted thinking affords them a constant sense of being out of place in the world. Just from personal experience, I found this trait to be very charming and also very conflicting when observing INFPs. When an INFP is well developed and healthy, which, as with any type, is not always the case, their greatest contribution is often to remind people that individual values have inherent worth, and they don't always need to be justified with logic or utility, and that we do pay a great price whenever we let those values slip away. However, this does make INFPs the eternal misfits. Despite the litany of issues that this can cause them, ultimately, I don't think they'd have it any other way.